Hello, I'm doing a review for this book, George Orwell 1984. The book's divided into 3 sections and I feel that they differ enough to describe them separately. So, first part, the book started okay, but it wasn't gripping me. And this first part is a sort of an introduction to a future world. So 1984 tells the story of Winston Smith living in a future version of London. The world is split into 3 sections and there's always a war going on between them. Oceania, where Winston lives, is controlled by a one-party system which is extremely totalitarian. Constant watch is kept on the party members through screens and microphones. Alongside this, behaviour expectations are categorically expressed and there's no sort of romantic involvement between people. Information is also highly controlled, with past documents being continuously corrected to toe the party line. Many of the themes are the same as in Animal Farm, although they're more clearly articulated in 1984. However, this story, it doesn't feel as vibrant as Animal Farm. Unfortunately, I think the detailed description of the grey, miserable, prophesied future of 1984 has just infected this whole feel of the first part of the book. I also didn't feel that the book has aged particularly well. And after all, it's over 30 years since the doomed date of 1984. So I found myself asking, is this book still relevant? Of course, there's many phrases which have become part of our modern language from the book, such as Big Brother and Room 101. So I also want to understand a bit more about what these phrases really represent and if they're more relevant now than just TV show slogans. My enthusiasm for the book took a hit when I was introduced to the proles. The proles make up the majority of the population and they're sort of the lower class. They've been left to run more savage than ever. I lost interest here because now I fail to identify so well with Winston's situation, because let's face it, in this futuristic scenario I'd probably be one of the proles. Rabid sex and alcoholism and young disease death still sounds enviable compared to the life of the party members. The telescreens of the book are certainly much closer to being reality today than they ever have been before. So these are screens which both tell you what to do and give you constant propaganda feed, and also can hear everything and see everything that's going on. So perhaps it's this surveillance of the state on its members which has been the most prophetic part of the book, like that Alexa. You know, I find the idea of her bloody terrifying. I already don't trust my smart TV. In the second part of the book, Winston rebels against the party and its doctrine. He participates in a love affair and he spends time away from the party quarters and activities, and his mind swells with possibilities for the future. And for me, this book really sprung into life in the second part. I found that the love interest really perked the book up, and I'm finding that this character of Julia adds a vibrancy to the story that I feel is needed and appreciated. She adds a new view of the system and a new dimension to the story. When they join the resistance, known as the Brotherhood, they're given the book, which is an honest account of the world they live in. And the excerpts of the book are really a philosophical piece, and I feel that Orwell's musings and conclusions about society and the people in it have really been polished and are better presented than in some of his earlier books. There are observations made about great power blocks existing in constant states of war, although never actually penetrating each other's borders. This seems to perfectly describe the Cold War, and also of overproduction of goods being subsidised by unnecessary war, because constant production is necessary to keep people oppressed. It's also needed to sustain capitalism in our culture. There are some excellent phrases to be taken from the book as well, such as inequality was the price of civilization, and the masses never revolt of their own accord, and they never revolt merely because they are oppressed. And these observations, which to me ring true, are just priceless. The second part of the book ends with the lovers being arrested, as they've always known they would be, because no one ever beats the system, as they have always accepted we are the dead. And the third part of the book is when Winston is captured and tortured and eventually brainwashed. I found this part of the book really sad because although it's a fictional account of actions, nothing on the list of torture has not been carried out by countries in the last century. And it made me think about all the awful things that people have gone through and continue to go through around the world in order that the powerful retain their power. Because that's what it's really about. The torture is to break Winston from his deepest ties, his deepest loves and hopes. Winston is finally shot for his betrayal of the party, but it takes years before it happens, because in this world no one gets their death until they have fully submitted to the party, until they believe it, and until they love Big Brother. So the final chapter of this book is Winston, sustained by sickly victory gin, believing in the hype and the propaganda, and being finally grateful to Big Brother for protecting him. Finally he loves Big Brother, and finally he's shot. So at the end of this book I asked again, is the book still relevant? And yes, I think so, but it's not a prophecy, it's a story, and as with all good stories, it shows us truths which cannot always be explained coherently in the ever-changing construct of our daily lives. And this book lays the people in positions of power naked for their paranoia, for their desperation to be needed, loved and powerful. It shows their relentlessness, their ruthlessness, and their ever-continuing victory. So I also want to give another shout out for Orwell's storytelling, because although I complained at the beginning of the book that I was struggling to get into it, once it hooked me, I was completely pulled in. I've never found myself reading the pages ahead before I get to them, because I'm so eager to find out what happens next, but I did with this book. It's also thought-provoking, and it brought out some deep emotions, brought them up to the surface. So bravo Orwell, bloody good story. I really enjoyed it in that way that it made me feel uncomfortable and at times desolate, but enjoyable all the same.